At the table are, as always, ABC24's political analyst Otis Sanford, and then we have Worth Morgan, the chair of the Shelby County Republican Party, new to the show. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And then Pastor Keith Norman from First Baptist Church Broad. Or First Baptist Church Broad, yeah, I said it right. Woo. All right, introductions always get me. All right, so first up, we're talking about the state trial here. So we have three former ex-cops, Tadarius Bean, Demetrius Haley, and Justin Smith, all facing 7 charges from second-degree murder all the way to kidnapping, assault, and misconduct. We already know the federal trial happened, and that was more about obstruction and so infringing on civil rights. But this one seems more is at stake here. We're talking about second-degree murder. So the trial wrapped up week 1. Prosecution rests their case by the 3rd day, which was unexpected, pretty quick. And then the defense took their time to bring other witnesses up to actually speak to the character of these 3 officers. So Otis, I'll have you take it away. What were your takeaways from week 1?
Well, actually, you just mentioned one. My biggest takeaway was the short amount of time that the prosecution took with this case in chief. They only had 5 witnesses, which I found that to be very surprising. They have the burden of proof here. And I expected to, well, only one of the officers who had pleaded guilty testified. I expected to hear someone higher up in the police department, maybe even C.J. Davis, to talk about policies and procedures, especially as it relates to the Scorpion unit, because the defense is saying that they did everything properly and followed procedure. Well, did they? Bring in a top police person like C.J. Davis to say whether they did or not. So again, I have no idea how this is going to turn out. Nobody does. I've covered a lot of trials in my time. But this is an interesting one because I'm just not sure where, I'm just not sure that the prosecution has put on enough to get the highest charges across the finish line to conviction.
Most definitely. Worth, you want to add?
Yeah, I think the prosecution is really relying heavily on the video evidence. And if I were to make a guess as to what they're doing, they don't want to dilute the strength of that evidence because that video is absolutely horrific. And they want that to be first and foremost in the jury's mind when it comes to the case that they're presenting. And of course, the defense attorneys, it's their job to throw everything at the wall. They're going to blame policies and procedures. They're going to blame the 2 other cops that have already pled guilty and aren't on trial at the moment. They're going to blame everything they can except for their clients and hope that one of those will give the jury an excuse to find an acquittal on some of these charges. That's their job. I still think that the defense has a tough hill to climb because of that video evidence. Just is so difficult to watch.
Now, you mentioned the jury. I think that's one thing that we need to talk about here because it's an out-of-county jury from the Chattanooga area. We spoke about this a lot over the last week of how that is going to play into this case. So, Pastor Norman, what do you think? How does that play a factor here?
I think it's the jury that's going to make the difference. I think by getting an outside jury, the prosecution is banking on the fact that they're going to be able to persuade this group because of the video evidence, and they already have 2 guilty pleas. Now, there's a high bar when it comes to intent. That's the one thing that concerns me because that's a high bar to reach, and to be able to say that and get it to stick is going to be problematic, I think. But other than that, I don't think they're going to have a high bar.
Now, we do have a couple of quick sound bites that I want to play from Rovon Wells, who took the stand on the first day from the prosecution side, calling her up. And the defense chose actually not to cross-examine her on the first day, which was, you know, something to be said. And then that'll follow with Desmond Mills, who's one of the former ex-cops who pleaded guilty already. And then after that, we will actually hear from Paul Hagerman with the DA's office questioning Preston Hemphill, who was kind of, quote, the 6th officer, if you will, who was fired but not charged.
As a mother, as a parent, to tell the siblings that your baby brother is deceased and really for no reason at all.
I kept asking Martin what happened, like why you stopped him and how do we get over here and how do we get to this, because I was in disbelief on how this Nichols looked.
So one of those things, Desmond Mills, that we just ended with, we're hearing him even say, I was praying for him on that night. I knew it was bad. You know, we're hearing that's pretty That's pretty huge here, I think. So, Worth, I want to ask you, I mean, what do you think about his testimony and how that plays in the defense?
You can see that through the video, there was a lot of frustration, there was a lot of adrenaline, and as things began to calm down, which you wish there had been a senior officer on scene or an officer with just a little bit more character to slow all those officers down in the heat of it. But once things started slowing down, you see them pacing, you see them kind of looking at each other, and you start having some of their testimony and comments about, what did we just do? What happened? This is not good. I think they understood the gravity of the situation very quickly, and there's certainly remorse and regret, but that still doesn't exclude the possibility that there was a crime that was committed too.
Yeah, they also had a pastor. They did have a Beans supervisor come on and speak to the character. So, Pastor Norman, I feel like that's a pretty typical, common thing for the defense to do, is try to humanize these officers. But will that sway the jury?
I don't know if it'll sway the jury, but it does impact the way we present these individuals. This is not who they were all of their lives. That's basically what a character witness will say. I know this person differently. I've been called in to give character reference on people before, and I can share with you what I know about them. I can't say that they would not do a particular thing, unfortunately, because the evidence is right before us. This is a real thing that happened. But is this the pattern of behavior that that person practices every day? I don't think so.
That's an interesting perspective. And Otis, there was one thing too that the defense did that's kind of one of those, the ugly truths start to come out. But I will say they called up the man that had his wallet stolen and his IDs that were found with Tyree Nichols. So they called him up. His name was Jordan Riley, to the stand, and that's a pretty bold play. I mean, it's hard to hear. We've heard about Tyree Nichols. He's kind of become somewhat of a martyr now. How do you feel about calling? Does that warrant?
Well, yeah,
the charge?
the defense, to Worth's point, the defense is going to throw everything out there. And one of the things that they would throw out there is to try to besmirch Tyree Nichols' character. You know, they brought up the fact that there was marijuana in the trunk of the car. And so they're trying to bring him down from that martyr stardom that he has and try to make him part of the problem, because they are claiming that he resisted and he ran away and all of this. But Worth, you hit the nail on the head earlier on. The video tells the story here. And if the jury is going to convict, and I'm not saying that they are, they'll do it on the strength of the video more than anything else.
But I think it should be mentioned, though, that we should not ever get to the point where discovery after the fact takes and take a person and take their character. I mean, we didn't know what was in the trunk of that car.
I agree.
They didn't know. They had no idea what was in the trunk of that car. And so what went on was way out of bounds. And nothing will trump Ms. Rovon Wells' opening statements. She ended her comments with comments that I can't restate on the air, but the truth of it is that's exactly what happened. They went way too far and they did way too much.
No question.
Also, you've got 5 different officers that took 5 different actions that night, and they're going to go through the evidence and they're going to look at every single punch that was thrown, every single baton that was swung or kick that was given to Tyree, and they're going to try to determine, was that potentially a lethal blow? Which officer was the officer that kicked him in the head, that led to the bleeding, that led to the internal trauma, that led to his death, and can they be more responsible than the other officers who might not have done as much damage to him? So it could be that we could see a variety of convictions or charges come out from, not just charges, but convictions come out from this at different levels for the officers based on the actions they took that night.
Most definitely. And I will say Mills's testimony really showed the individual acts too. He was able to take it there. The outcome of this trial, any worries about outcries from the community or rallies or just what does this mean? How much is at stake for policing in Shelby County and in Memphis?
Well, I'll just say briefly that everybody's going to be looking when the decision is getting ready to be made. We'll stop what we're doing. I do think that the outcome, if it's convictions, and especially if it's convictions at the highest level, is going to force the police department to make some drastic changes here.
All of it hinges on the way Ms. Rovon Wells has conducted herself. If you recall, in the first trial, she was always a calming effect. Even though she was very upset with the way things happened, she was always a mother who said to the city of Memphis, please don't act out in unnecessary ways. And so a lot goes out to her. And then I'm going to watch her as we continue to all empathize and pray for that family. I think a lot hinges on how she receives this information.
I will say that I do feel that the community and the law enforcement connection right now, or the bond, is fragile. So, Worth, I'll let you wrap it up here. Just what are your thoughts about the outcome of this trial and that relationship?
There's certainly going to be an emotional response to whatever the verdict is. If I were still on the Memphis City Council, I would be hitting the administration over and over and over again about who are we hiring to the Memphis Police Department, because it is in everybody's best interest. The side of the community that wants law and order and to be safe and be protected, and the side of the community that makes sure that protection, those police that are out there, are doing so in a responsible and fair and even-handed way. We get there if we actually hire the best in blue. If we have men and women of quality and character that are going through the training, that are adhering to the policies and procedures of the Memphis Police Department, that's in the best interest of the entire community.
Okay, I think that does it justice there.